Hello, and welcome to Mind in Action, the podcast from Mindcraft, where we explore the mental models and frameworks that shape our world. I want you to think about your mind for a moment. Imagine it's an attic, a vast, sprawling attic at the top of your house. Over the years, you've carried countless things up its narrow, creaking stairs. In one corner are heavy boxes of old memories, sealed with tape, but still radiating a faint emotional charge. In another, a pile of half-finished projects, covered in a thin film of guilt and whispering of what could have been. And everywhere, a fine layer of dusty anxieties about the future, mixed with faded souvenirs from past failures. Every new decision, every piece of information, every opinion you hear is another item you feel compelled to haul up those stairs and store, just in case. Eventually, the attic becomes so cluttered that you can barely move. The air is thick and still with the scent of old paper and stagnant potential. And when you actually need to find something important, a core value, a clear desire, a simple truth, you're faced with an impossible, exhausting task, rummaging through a lifetime of accumulated junk. Many of us are living in that mental attic. We tell ourselves we're being thorough. We convince ourselves we're being prepared. But in reality, it's a state of self-imposed paralysis. We face a decision, and instead of a clear path, our mind generates 1,000 branching possibilities, a dizzying flowchart of pros, cons, and what-ifs. We want to start a new project, but we get bogged down in endless research, planning for every conceivable obstacle until the initial, beautiful spark of inspiration is smothered under the weight of our own preparations. This is the signature affliction of the modern mind: overthinking. We analyze, we strategize, we complicate, believing that more information and more variables will lead to a better, safer outcome. But what if the opposite is true? What if clarity isn't found by adding more to the attic, but by having the courage to clear it out? What if the most powerful tool for navigating our complex world isn't a supercomputer, but a simple, elegant blade? Today, we're going to explore a philosophical tool so sharp, so effective that for 700 years, it has been used to slice through complexity and reveal the elegant truth beneath. It's a principle known as Occam's razor, and it offers a profound guide for simplifying our decisions, solving our problems, and decluttering our minds. So if you're tired of living in a crowded mental attic, join me as we learn how to wield this ancient tool to carve out a space for clarity, focus, and peace in our increasingly complicated lives. So, what exactly is this philosophical razor? To find its origin, we have to travel back to 14th century England, to a Franciscan friar and philosopher named William of Ockham. Ockham was a brilliant thinker, living in a time of incredibly complex theological and philosophical debates. He saw arguments being built upon layers and layers of abstract assumptions, creating towering intellectual structures that were ultimately unstable. His most enduring legacy wasn't a new, even more complex theory. Ironically, it's a principle of radical simplicity. In his Latin writings, the principle was stated as entia non sunt multiplicanda praeter necessitatem, which translates to entities should not be multiplied beyond necessity. Now, that might still sound a bit academic. Let's put it in more practical terms. Occam's razor is a problem-solving principle that says when you're presented with competing explanations for a phenomenon, you should select the one that makes the fewest assumptions. It's a heuristic, a mental shortcut that guides us to the most probable answer. In other words, the simplest explanation is usually the right one. Let's make this real. Imagine you come home one evening and your Wi-Fi is down. Immediately, your mind, a natural storyteller, starts generating hypotheses. Hypothesis A: the router needs to be rebooted. This requires one assumption, that routers, like all technology, sometimes glitch. It's a simple, mechanical failure. Hypothesis B: your neighbor, who you had a minor disagreement with last week, has somehow hacked into your network and is deliberately blocking your signal as an act of passive-aggressive revenge. This requires a whole chain of assumptions. Your neighbor has the technical skill, the motivation, the specific equipment, and a surprisingly villainous streak. You're not just assuming a technical failure, but a complex web of human intent and capability. Hypothesis C: A sophisticated ring of international cybercriminals has targeted your specific IP address as a weak point to launch a massive attack on the global financial system, and your downed Wi-Fi is just the first sign of a looming digital apocalypse. This, of course, requires a mountain of extraordinary and highly improbable assumptions about your own significance in a global plot. Occam's razor doesn't say hypothesis C is impossible, but it tells you where to start. It acts as a filter for probability. It gently takes hypotheses B and C and shaves them away, leaving you with the simplest, most likely explanation, hypothesis A. Before you start investigating your neighbor or preparing for doomsday, just try unplugging the router and plugging it back in. This principle became a cornerstone of the scientific method. Scientists call it the principle of parsimony. When two theories make the same predictions, the one with fewer moving parts, fewer arbitrary rules, and fewer unobservable entities is preferred. This was the heart of the Copernican revolution. The old Ptolemaic model of the universe with the Earth at the center required incredibly complex additions, epicycles, deferents, equants, to explain the observed movements of the planets. It became a messy, patched-together theory. Copernicus proposed a much simpler model. The planets, including Earth, revolve around the sun. It was a simpler explanation that required fewer ad hoc fixes, and it ultimately proved to be correct. It's the reason we accept that gravity is a fundamental force of nature, rather than believing that invisible flying angels are constantly pushing everything down. One explanation is elegant and simple. The other requires multiplying entities unnecessarily. But the true power of Occam's razor, the reason we're talking about it on this podcast, is what happens when you turn that blade inward. When you apply it not to external phenomena, but to the stories you tell yourself. Our minds are the ultimate factory for multiplying entities. Every worry, every anxiety, every catastrophic what-if scenario is an unnecessary entity we create. Occam's razor in this context becomes a tool for mental liberation. It's a blade of mindfulness, helping us shave away the tangled weeds of our own overthinking so the simple truth can get some light. If simplicity is so powerful, why are our minds so drawn to complexity? Why is our default setting to build elaborate mental castles of what-ifs and worst-case scenarios? Understanding this is key to using the razor effectively. The primary driver is fear, a deeply ingrained evolutionary impulse. For our ancient ancestors on the savannah, the cost of a false positive was far lower than the cost of a false negative. If you heard a rustle in the grass, assuming it was a lion, a complex hypothesis involving a hidden predator, and running away was a low-cost mistake if it was just the wind. But assuming it was just the wind, a simple hypothesis, was a fatal mistake if it was, in fact, a lion. Our brains are therefore hardwired with a negativity bias. They are designed to be oversensitive to potential threats. The lion is gone, but that ancient threat detection software is still running. Today, it doesn't scan the grasslands for predators. It scans our emails for subtext, our relationships for signs of trouble, and our futures for potential failures. Overthinking feels productive. It feels like we're taking a problem seriously, but often it's just our ancient brain running its lion in the grass program in a world where the threats are abstract and often self-created. This primal fear is then amplified by the quirks of our own psychology, our cognitive biases. The most famous is confirmation bias. Once we have a fear, say a fear of public speaking, our brain will actively seek out and overemphasize evidence that confirms it. It creates a mental echo chamber. We'll remember the one time we stumbled over a word, not the 99 times we spoke clearly. We'll imagine faces in the audience frowning, not smiling. We create a complex narrative of failure because we're biased toward finding the evidence that supports it. Another powerful bias at play is the availability heuristic, where we overestimate the importance of information that is recent and dramatic. If we just read a news story about a rare disease, a simple headache can suddenly become a complex and terrifying symptom of a terminal illness in our minds, because that dramatic possibility is more available to our brain than the simple truth that most headaches are just headaches. Paradoxically, another reason we complicate things is a fear of seeming unintelligent. This is related to a psychological phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. In a social or professional context, some may use complex jargon and convoluted explanations to mask a lack of true understanding. They believe complexity signals intelligence. In contrast, true experts, the ones who have achieved mastery, often have the profound ability to make the complex simple. They don't need to hide behind complexity because they have a deep grasp of the fundamentals. And finally, all of this is supercharged by the modern world of information overload. We are drowning in data. Want to buy a new blender? There are 200 models, 500 reviews, and 30 YouTube comparison videos. You can spend a week researching, creating spreadsheets, and agonizing over features you will likely never use. This process leads to decision fatigue and the pervasive fear of missing out, FOMO, on the perfect choice. The sheer volume of information pushes us to believe that the correct decision must be a complex one that accounts for every single data point. We lose sight of the simple core of the issue. I just need something that makes good smoothies. Understanding these forces, evolutionary fear, cognitive biases, information overload, and social pressure is the first step. It allows us to see our tendency to overthink not as a personal failing, but as a predictable pattern of a mind trying its best to navigate a world it wasn't built for. And it gives us permission to choose a different path, the path of simplicity, clarity, and courage. So, how do we take this 700-year-old principle and apply it to our 21st century lives? How do we transform it from an abstract idea into a daily practice? Let's get practical and explore how to wield the razor in the areas where we need it most. First, and perhaps most crucially, is in decision-making. Let's think about someone named Sarah, who is considering a career change. She's been a graphic designer for years, but feels unfulfilled. Her mind immediately creates a complex decision tree. Should I become a user experience designer? The pay is better, but I'd have to go back to school. Or maybe I should start my own freelance business. That offers freedom, but what about health insurance? Or what if I just find a new graphic design job at a different company? It's safer, but will I just be bored again in a year? She spends weeks creating spreadsheets, listing pros and cons, and falls into the classic trap of analysis paralysis. Occam's razor cuts through this noise by asking a single, powerful question. What is the simplest underlying truth of what I want? After shaving away the layers of external expectations and fear-based what-ifs, Sarah's core truth might be, I want to use my creative skills to solve tangible problems for people. Suddenly, the fog begins to clear. That simple statement becomes her compass. It doesn't instantly tell her which job to take, but it reframes the question. Instead of which option is perfect, the question becomes, which option is the most direct path toward using my skills to solve problems? The answer becomes clearer, less about a perfect, risk-free choice, and more about taking the next logical step. Next, let's apply the razor to problem solving. Imagine a small tech startup where a new product launch is failing to gain traction. The team could generate complex hypotheses. Our entire marketing strategy is flawed. Or, our competitors have launched a secret campaign against us. Or, the market is fundamentally not ready for our innovation. These are huge, daunting problems that lead to panic and inaction. Occam's razor encourages them to start with the simplest explanations first. Is there a critical bug in the sign-up process that's frustrating users? They investigate and find a simple coding error that makes it impossible to register on certain browsers. Or a simpler hypothesis. Is our pricing page confusing? A quick redesign clarifies the options. By testing and eliminating the simplest potential causes first, they can often solve the problem directly and efficiently, without needing to burn everything down and start over based on a complex, unsubstantiated theory. The razor is also a powerful antidote to the complexity we inject into our health and wellness. The wellness industry often thrives on complexity, miracle supplements, convoluted diet plans, biohacking gadgets. We forget that the simplest explanation for good health has remained unchanged for centuries. Eat real food, move your body, get enough sleep, and manage your stress. Before you invest in a complex 10-step detox program, Occam's razor asks, have I consistently tried the simple things first? And of course, there's the fertile ground of our relationships. This is where a close cousin of Occam's razor, known as Hanlon's razor, is incredibly useful. It states, Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by carelessness. Think about it. A friend cancels plans at the last minute. Your mind's complex, malicious hypothesis is, they don't value my friendship anymore. They probably got a better offer. This story creates pain and resentment. Hanlon's razor offers a simpler, less painful explanation. Something unexpected probably came up, or they're just overwhelmed and bad at planning. Consider a work scenario. A colleague delivers a presentation and fails to credit you for your contribution. The malicious, complex story is, they're trying to steal my work and sabotage my career. This leads to conflict and mistrust. The simpler, Hanlon's razor explanation is, they were nervous and simply forgot to mention my name. Or they assumed everyone already knew I was involved. Choosing to start with the simpler, less malicious explanation isn't naive. It's a strategic choice to conserve your own emotional energy and preserve relationships. It keeps your mind clear of the poison of unnecessary grievances. Finally, we bring the razor to our inner world. When you're spiraling into anxiety about the future, ask, what is the simplest truth? The answer is often, right now, in this moment, I am safe. When you're beating yourself up for a mistake, ask, what is the simpler explanation? It might be, I am a human being, and human beings are imperfect. This is a chance to learn. This isn't a one-time fix. It's a practice. With every decision, every interaction, every thought, you can pause and ask, is there a simpler way to see this? What assumptions can I shave away? Slowly, you begin to carve out a space of clarity in your mind, a space where you are no longer a prisoner of your own complexity. But my friends, the power of Occam's razor doesn't just stop at being an effective mental tool. When we practice it consistently, it begins to transform into something deeper, a philosophy of life, a way of appreciating the world. It's the philosophy of elegant simplicity. This philosophy finds a powerful modern expression in the movement of minimalism. We often think of minimalism in terms of physical possessions, white walls, sparse furniture, a capsule wardrobe, but that's just the external form. At its heart, minimalism isn't about owning less. It's about gaining more. More freedom, more time, more focus. Freedom from the burden of stuff, from the distraction of clutter. Occam's razor is minimalism for the mind. Just as we declutter a room by removing every object that doesn't serve a purpose or bring us joy, the razor helps us declutter our minds by shaving away every assumption, worry, and belief that doesn't serve our peace or align with the truth. What's left isn't emptiness. It's a vast, clear, internal space where wisdom and serenity have room to grow. This same spirit is the very essence of Zen and the practice of mindfulness. One of the core teachings in meditation is to observe our thoughts and feelings as they arise, like clouds passing in the sky, without grasping onto them, analyzing them, or building elaborate stories around them. When the thought, I'm not good enough, appears, the untrained mind might immediately multiply it into a feature-length film, complete with flashbacks to past failures and flash-forwards to future disasters. But the mindful practitioner, wielding an internal razor, simply acknowledges the thought's presence. There is a thought about not being good enough. They don't identify with it. They see it as a single, transient mental event and allow it to dissolve without adding more entities to it. This is the art of not creating suffering out of suffering. And the beauty of simplicity shines brilliantly in the realm of art and creativity. The genius Leonardo da Vinci once said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Look at the design philosophy of a company like Apple. Their products are powerful, not because of how many features they cram in, but because of how courageously they remove what is not essential, leaving a clean, intuitive, and elegant experience. In writing, a single, well-chosen word can carry more weight than a whole paragraph of flowery prose. This is Occam's razor in action, achieving maximum impact with minimum means. Ultimately, practicing Occam's razor is a shift in perception, from seeing complexity as a sign of intelligence to cherishing clarity as a mark of wisdom. It is the search for the strong, resonant truth that remains after all the noise has been stripped away. This pursuit of elegant simplicity isn't a new invention. It's a timeless truth that echoes through the great wisdom traditions of both the East and West, a golden thread connecting philosophies that are seemingly worlds apart. When we look closely, we find that Occam's razor is not just a Western logical tool. It is a universal principle for living a wiser, more effective life. Let's first travel to ancient Greece and Rome, to the porticos where the Stoic philosophers taught. At the very heart of Stoicism lies a concept called the dichotomy of control, most famously articulated by the philosopher Epictetus. The idea is profoundly simple. In life, some things are within our control, and some things are not. What's in our control? Our thoughts, our judgments, our choices, our actions. What's not in our control? Everything else, the weather, the economy, what other people think of us, our health, our reputation, and even the ultimate outcome of our efforts. The Stoics argued that the source of all human suffering comes from confusing these two categories, from trying to control what we cannot and neglecting what we can. Now, how is this Occam's razor in a different form? Think about it. Occam's razor shaves away unnecessary assumptions from an explanation. Stoicism shaves away unnecessary concerns from our minds. When we worry about whether it will rain on our outdoor wedding or whether a potential employer will like our personality, we are multiplying entities beyond necessity. We are creating complex emotional and mental scenarios, fear, anxiety, endless what-if games about things we have absolutely no power over. The Stoic applies a razor to this complexity. They ask, is this within my control? If the answer is no, they let it go. They shave it from their field of concern. All that remains is the simple, controllable part. For the wedding, it's not the weather, but the contingency plan. For the interview, it's not the outcome, but the quality of their preparation and the authenticity of their answers. This is an act of profound mental simplification. It clears the cluttered attic of the mind of all the junk that doesn't belong to us, leaving us with immense energy and focus to act effectively on the very few things that truly do. Now let's travel from the disciplined logic of the West to the flowing wisdom of the East, to the ancient Chinese philosophy of Taoism. A central concept in Taoism is Wu Wei, which is often translated as effortless action or non-forcing. This doesn't mean being lazy or passive. It means acting in perfect harmony with the natural flow of things, the Tao. It's the art of achieving the greatest effect with the least amount of resistance, of swimming with the current instead of fighting against it. The connection to Occam's razor here is subtle, but incredibly deep. A complex solution to a problem is almost always a sign of forcing, of going against the grain. It requires multiple interventions, constant adjustments, and a great deal of effort to maintain. A simple, elegant solution, on the other hand, often feels like it just clicks into place. It works with the existing system, not against it. It is the path of least resistance. Occam's razor guides us to the simplest explanation because it is often the one most aligned with the natural course of events. Wu Wei is the physical and spiritual embodiment of this principle. The classic Taoist metaphor is water. Water is the softest thing, yet it can overcome the hardest rock. It doesn't do this through brute force. It does it by yielding, by flowing, by finding the simplest path around the obstacle. A manager who tries to force a team to adopt a new, complicated process that clashes with their established workflow will meet with constant resistance. But a manager who observes the team's natural rhythm and introduces a single, simple change that enhances that flow is practicing Wu Wei. They are using the razor to cut away the complexity of force and instead find the simple power of alignment. Finally, let's bring this journey home, from ancient wisdom to the cutting edge of modern neuroscience. It's fascinating that these profound philosophical insights are now being validated by our understanding of the 3-pound universe inside our skulls. When our minds are cluttered and overthinking, neuroscientists can see a specific network in the brain light up. The default mode network, DMN. This is the network associated with mind wandering, ruminating about the past, worrying about the future, and thinking about ourselves. It is, in a very real sense, the brain's entity multiplication machine. Occam's razor can be seen as a conscious command to disengage this network. When we get stuck in a loop of complex what-if scenarios, we are trapped in the DMN. The act of asking, what is the simplest, most direct explanation or action here, forces our brain to shift gears. It activates the task-positive network, TPN, the part of our brain responsible for focused attention, problem-solving, and engaging with the present moment. We are literally shifting our neural activity from the cluttered attic to the focused workshop. Furthermore, consider the famous aha moment, that sudden flash of insight where a complex problem suddenly becomes simple. Neuroscientists have found that these moments rarely occur during periods of intense forced analysis. Instead, they often happen when we relax our focus while taking a shower, going for a walk, or waking up from sleep. Why? Because during these relaxed states, the brain is able to quiet the noisy, complex chatter of the conscious mind. It stops trying to force a solution and allows for new, simpler neural connections to be made. In essence, the brain is applying Occam's razor on its own, pruning away the dead-end complex pathways to reveal a simpler, more elegant one. The practice of Occam's razor in our daily lives is a way of consciously creating the mental conditions for these insights to emerge more often. We are intentionally clearing away the noise to make space for the signal. So, from the disciplined self-control of the Stoics, to the flowing, effortless action of the Taoists, to the neural networks firing in our own brains, we see the same fundamental truth emerge. Simplicity is not a shortcut for the intellectually lazy. It is a powerful, universal strategy for achieving wisdom, effectiveness, and peace. However, like any powerful tool, Occam's razor must be wielded with wisdom and care. To prevent simplicity from becoming simplistic, we need to walk what we might call the razor's edge. This is the fine line between clarifying simplicity and dangerous oversimplification. To truly master this tool, we must understand its limits and its paradoxes. First, we must confront the hard truth that the simplest explanation is usually the right one, but critically, not always. The history of human progress is filled with cautionary tales where a simple, intuitive idea was clung to for centuries, impeding our understanding of a more complex reality. Consider the story of stomach ulcers. For decades, the simple, accepted medical wisdom was that ulcers were caused by stress and spicy food. It made perfect sense. It was an easy-to-understand explanation that fit people's experiences. Any doctor who suggested otherwise was seen as complicating the issue. Then, in the 1980s, two Australian researchers, Barry Marshall and Robin Warren, proposed a far more complex and frankly bizarre theory that ulcers were caused by a bacterium called Helicobacter pylori. The medical community ridiculed them. A bacterial infection causing ulcers? It violated the simple established narrative. It took years of struggle, and Marshall famously drinking a petri dish of the bacteria to give himself an ulcer to prove their complex theory was correct. This story is a powerful reminder. Occam's razor is a starting heuristic, not a dogmatic law. It tells us where to look first, but it doesn't tell us to stop looking. This leads us to a crucial modern counterpoint: complexity theory. This field of science studies systems with many interconnected parts, like ecosystems, economies, or human societies. What it teaches us is that in these complex adaptive systems, simple linear cause and effect rarely exists. Small, seemingly insignificant events can trigger massive, raw, unpredictable consequences, the so-called butterfly effect. In these domains, applying Occam's razor naively isn't just wrong, it can be disastrous. A simple explanation for a stock market crash, like it was caused by one bad policy, will almost certainly be an oversimplification that ignores the intricate web of feedback loops, investor psychology, and global events that truly led to the crisis. In these situations, the wise approach is not to seek the simplest explanation, but to embrace the complexity and look for patterns and principles within it. The razor is a tool for cutting through unnecessary complexity, not for ignoring necessary complexity. Finally, we must appreciate the paradox of simplicity. The kind of elegant simplicity we admire in a beautifully designed product or a profound piece of writing is rarely the starting point. It is the destination. Steve Jobs, a master of simplicity, once said, "Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains." This reveals a crucial distinction between naive simplicity and earned simplicity. Naive simplicity is the state of not yet understanding the complexities of a problem. Earned simplicity is the state of having wrestled with all the complexities, understood them deeply, and then having the wisdom and courage to distill the problem down to its essential core. The first iPod wasn't simple because the engineers were lazy. It was simple because they went through the incredibly complex process of figuring out how to build a hard drive, a battery, and a user interface that could all work together, and then had the genius to hide all that complexity behind a single, simple scroll wheel. Therefore, think of Occam's razor not as a butcher's cleaver, hacking away indiscriminately, but as a skilled gardener's pruning shears. A wise gardener doesn't just cut every branch. They must first possess a deep, almost complex understanding of botany, of the plant's needs, its structure, its environment. Only with that deep knowledge can they know precisely which branches to prune to allow the plant to flourish. Wielding Occam's razor effectively requires the same wisdom. It is the art of knowing what to keep and having the courage, born from deep understanding, to let go of the rest. Our journey with Occam's razor is coming to a close. We've unearthed its ancient roots, explored the reasons our minds cling to complexity, and learned how to apply its simple power to nearly every aspect of our lives. The world outside will not get any less complex. The fire hose of information, the endless choices, the constant pressures, they will continue. We cannot change the torrent, but we can change how we navigate it. We can choose not to be swept away by the chaos. We can choose to maintain a clear, calm space within. Occam's razor, in the end, is more than just a logical tool. It's a philosophy of enough. Enough information to make a good decision, not all the information in the world. Enough concern to be prudent, not enough to be paralyzed. Enough analysis to understand, not enough to be overwhelmed. It is the art of finding elegance in economy, power in focus, and freedom in letting go of the unnecessary. So as you go about your day, I invite you to try a small experiment. Pick one thing that's weighing on your mind, a decision, a worry, a nagging problem. Sit with it for a moment. Take a breath. And then, gently with your own razor of wisdom, ask yourself, what is the simplest explanation here? What is the path with the fewest assumptions? What is the core truth my heart is trying to tell me? Shave away the what-ifs, the shoulds, and the fears you've borrowed from others. Shave away the pressure to be perfect, the need to have a complicated answer to prove you're smart. Give yourself permission to trust in the simple. Because deep beneath the noisy chaos of our thoughts, there is often a quiet, simple truth waiting to be heard. And in that simplicity, we find not only our answer, but our peace. Thank you for joining me on Mindcraft.